coming up on The Cost of Living.
So you have to be a little bit nuts, a little bit cultish to get any startup to the point where it might succeed. So I understand that ideology, but what it leads to is a lot of folks saying, hey, this is going to change everything. And that basically never happens.
The next big thing is always right around the corner. It's going to change the world. The hype is real, but could disruption be overrated? Hi, I'm Paul Havershood. Welcome to The Cost of Living. Big tech promised us the end of car ownership, the end of laptops, the end of food. No, really. Disruption was coming for how we eat. Until it wasn't. Christopher Mims is the Wall Street Journal's tech columnist. He just looked at how well he's done predicting the future. Coming up why he, and we, can fall for the hype. Also today, if you're planning a trip to the US, you might think, ugh, the exchange rate. But look a little further, and our humble Canadian dollar isn't so humble. It's actually putting a lot of other countries on sale. Up first, sometimes we accept no substitutes. The ketchup has to be Heinz. For a brand, that kind of loyalty is worth its weight in gold. But it can also be fragile. Ellis Cho, we both cook with the same chili garlic paste.
Yeah, the one with the rooster on it and the green cap.
Right, but not too long ago, there was a shortage. Your sister, she was like, I can't live without this. So she made her own. You brought me a jar.
Yeah, it was pretty good, but it wasn't quite the same.
No, we use Huy Fong. That's the brand. It's probably best known for its sriracha.
Yeah, rooster sauce. And when it disappeared, people noticed. Like Taylene Nguyen. Her family puts it on everything.
We'll use it for like stuff that's not even Asian food. Like we just have with eggs and bread. You know, it's a nice like kick to have. You know how people use Tabasco for some things, right? We use like sriracha on steak sometimes.
She really digs her sriracha.
Does she ever? And Taylene doesn't just use sriracha at home.
Hi there. Just for two? All right, anywhere you'd like.
It's a staple at her family's Vietnamese restaurants in Calgary, a key ingredient in their sauté soup. So when there was a shortage...
And we were freaking out. It's kind of like when you have ketchup and then you don't have ketchup anymore. Like, what do I eat with my fries? Right? So the same thing, what do I have with my pho?
Yeah, it was a dark time. I mean, this shortage, it was due to a lack of peppers, right?
Yeah, Huy Fong uses red jalapeno peppers. And over the last few years, the company has had to stop and start production. It had a falling out with its main supplier. Then its new supplier got hit with the drought. So rooster sauce disappeared for a while, then it came back. But last month, the company halted production again because of more pepper problems.
So the first time around, loyal Huy Fong fans, they waited out the shortage. Will they wait it out again?
We're about to find out. This is almost a case study for brand loyalty. Like, how loyal is loyal? Almost every product has competition and substitutes.
So then what needs to happen for someone to step up and buy one of those substitutes, whether it's hot sauce or anything else?
Well, if you look at Huy Fong, a lot of its brand loyalty comes from the taste. It's unique. Other hot sauces are close, but they're not exactly the same. Taylie's restaurants tried other srirachas. They even tried making their own, but customers noticed. And for some, it became BYOHS, bring your own hot sauce.
They had I've seen somebody with the full bottle, or I've seen someone just have it in a little container. I give them a fist bump for it. I was like, I respect that.
Huy Fong Foods has been making sriracha for a long time. The owner, David Tran, introduced it to the U.S. in the early 80s. He started making it in his basement.
So what's his secret sauce for, his hot sauce?
Fans say it has just the right amount of heat, sweet, and garlic, and it's not too vinegary. In Thailand, they call that klum klum.
Klum klum?
It means different tastes, all in balance. But Taste isn't the only reason people are loyal to the rooster. Jan Corneal teaches marketing and consumer behavior at UBC, and he says brand loyalty can also come from deeper associations that are built over time.
It's this the feeling of high familiarity that you have when you're tasting the product, and that brings back memories from the past, or that can elicit those positive emotions, or that can be comforting.
So he's talking about comfort food here, like literally comfort food.
Yeah, food hits us, right, at this really basic level. Like once you like something, you keep going back to it. And according to Jan, if you eat that food at happy times, then every time you eat it, even if you're not having a great day, it can make you feel better. And that kind of positive association can create loyalty.
You know, when you had a bad day and you're retrieving the taste that you like of whether it's Nutella, sriracha, or Coca-Cola, or Kraft mac and cheese, it is comforting to find that highly familiar taste.
This is why something like knockoff KD, that just ain't doing it for some people.
Well, KD has a specific taste. For some people, it's worth paying that extra 50 cents a box. Jan says brand loyalty can be powerful. The textbook example of this is Coca-Cola. Remember when they came out with new Coke?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that was a disaster.
Yeah, they stopped making the original Coke. And people cared so much, they protested in the streets. Jan says when a product changes, it can be like a friend or a family member going away. You don't really realize how much they mean to you until they're gone.
So this is like absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah, but only up to a point. If you can't get a product, you'll eventually go looking for a substitute. So something like Huy Fong's pepper shortage, it's opening the door to competition.
So brand loyalty, good, but also kind of fragile because competitors are always just looking for a little crack, and if they can wedge their foot in the door, then they're in.
Yeah, it's already happening. The company that makes Tabasco, they make sriracha now. And there are several other copycat brands that look identical to the Rooster brand. Same bottle, same green lid.
And as these competitors are circling around, here's Huy Fong, it doesn't have enough peppers, but what it does have is brand loyalty. Will it be able to keep this brand loyalty?
Linda Huar thinks so. She's with Keen Fat Trading in Toronto. Her family goes way back with David Tran, the owner of Huy Fong Foods. Her father got a taste of the rooster in the 80s and started importing it to Canada. At the start, they sold maybe 100 bottles every few months. Now, it's about 150,000 bottles every month. And from the beginning, she says David Tran's main focus was always just about making good hot sauce.
He wants a product to stand on its own. That's why Huy Fong has never done any marketing, nor have they done any press. He truly believes that if you love my sriracha, if you love my hot sauce, if you like this product, the product should stand on its own and you should be able to buy it and enjoy it.
Huy Fong grew by word of mouth. Now it's the third most popular hot sauce in the U.S. So Linda isn't too worried about this hiccup in supply.
Well, sure, but she also said people should be able to buy it and enjoy it, and pretty soon they might not be able to do either of those things.
It's definitely a risk for the brand, especially with so many potential substitutes. And the fact that they won't be making any rooster sauce until at least the fall.
So we could see how far brand loyalty really stretches, because by the fall, hey, who knows? Maybe it's like Frank's Red Hot's world and we're all just living in it.
For some people, maybe, but not Taylor Nguyen and her family. They've been stocking up on Huy Fong since last year and using it sparingly, like only to make their satay soup.
I see it almost as like a precious thing. You know, we have to keep, so I try not to even use the one in the restaurant. The ones in the restaurants are like, to us, I see it as gold.
She's pretty loyal.
She likes what she likes.
she and Huy Fong better hope that those peppers get sorted out. Thanks, Alice.
You're welcome.
This is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Havershood. Say you want to take a trip to New York. It ain't going to be cheap. You could stay at a Motel 6 in Newark, New Jersey, that's almost New York, for $136 a night. With the exchange rate, that's $186 Canadian. Traveling to the US with our dollar doesn't make Canadians feel like the world is our oyster. But the US isn't the only place to go. And when producer Danielle Nerman looks around this big wide world of ours, she finds a lot of reasons to feel better about the loonie.
When Calgarian Chris Hayes and his partner travel, they only go places that are warm and cheap.
What were we paying? Like, on average, maybe $55 a night. It was a 1-bedroom, 2 bathrooms, huge outdoor terrace on the top of a building.
In Argentina, $55 gets you a sweet Airbnb. A silky smooth Malbec with notes of smoke and licorice. $2. Ubers are inexpensive. And eating out?
The bill might come to 50,000 pesos. Sounds like a lot, but it's really $50. And there's 4 of you there, and you've had 3 bottles of wine and, steak and tenderloin.
Yep, the Canadian dollar goes a heck of a lot further in Buenos Aires than Boston or Brooklyn.
What I get in Argentina for a month might be like a week-ish in any of those US places.
Headlines describe the loonie as weak and falling. That kind of talk can bruise the national ego. But if you're feeling bummed about our dollar, remember this. It's only weak compared to the greenback.
South Africa, Turkey.
Carl Shimada is the chief market strategist at CorePlay, a foreign exchange and payments company.
Indonesia, the Philippines, all of those countries have relatively depressed currencies. Your Canadian dollar will go a long way, and on top of that, you'll do a lot for the local economy.
Carl says currencies could be the most complicated market there is. Every currency has its own reasons for going up and down against every other currency in the world. Sometimes it's because a country has too much government debt, or it's battling inflation. Not like what we have here. In Turkey, inflation is running at 70%.
President Erdogan at one point was telling the central bank to maintain very low interest rates, even though they had high inflation, which is, the opposite of what you really should do when you have high inflation. And so what was happening was, money was flooding out of the country.
But tourism dollars have been flooding in. Last year, Turkey saw a record number of international visitors. Travelers may not know all the ins and outs of currency trading, but they do know where to find a deal. Like Japan, which historically hasn't been the most affordable place to travel.
That's the understatement of the century.
Guys, Japan is kind of on sale, even for Canadians.
Costs have gone down dramatically for someone who's coming from another industrialized country.
The Japanese yen has been sliding steadily for 3 years. It hasn't been this low against the loonie since 1990.
Japan is facing very different fundamentals than the rest of the world. The population is aging very quickly. Productivity is not very high. So the central bank and the government have been trying for a very, very long time to keep the economy afloat by providing cheap money.
But it won't stay like this forever. Japan is already trying to boost the value of the yen. This spring, it spent $62 billion US intervening in the foreign exchange market and raised interest rates for the first time in 17 years. So,
strike while the iron is hot. Definitely visit Japan while you can.
And don't forget to do some shopping.
For anyone, coming from Canada, the clothing is cheap in relative terms. There's lots and lots of variety. The only issue is finding something that fits.
Or just take the kids to Disneyland. Tickets are half the price in Tokyo than California. For The Cost of Living, I'm Danielle Nerman.
On your Radio and By podcast, This is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Looking at it now, the internet turned out to be a pretty big deal. So did the iPhone. But not everything lives up to the hype. We're not all living in the metaverse or scooting around on Segways. Why are we so ready to believe in the next big thing? Christopher Mims is a tech columnist at the Wall Street Journal. He just wrote about, well, being wrong, about stuff he thought was going to change the world, but didn't, and what we might learn from that. Hello.
Hello, good to be here.
Well, thanks for being here. So, Christopher, you wrote an entire column talking about what you've learned in 10 years of covering tech, some of the stuff you got right, but also a lot of the stuff you got wrong. First of all, that's brave, man.
I'm glad you think so. I think I'm at a point in my career where I feel like it's more foolhardy not to admit my mistakes.
If you could pick one prediction, something you wrote about that you could take back because you look at it and you kind of cringe a little bit, is there something that stands out?
Oh, there's more than one thing. A few years ago, I said Apple should kill off the Mac. That was a bad call. A few years before that, I said that prefabricated construction from Silicon Valley-based construction companies would take over the market. That was a bad call. A few years before that, I gave some airtime to Elon Musk and his cousin Lyndon Reeve, who at the time were kind of pushing their respective visions about the future of energy and energy storage. And that hasn't really turned out the way anybody hoped.
You know, one of the things you wrote about that, in retrospect, you got wrong was the end of food. Why were you thinking the end of food was something that was going to happen?
This is a great example of where a columnist overindulges their personal bias. So at the time, I had very young children, and I felt like I really need to cut something out of my life. Maybe it's just cooking for myself. So at the time, Soylent was big in Silicon Valley, and they shipped me a case of it, and it was supposed to be this, total nutrition, complete meal replacement, not like a diet shake, like Slim Fast or something. Like this was supposed to be something you could actually live on. And there were all these people. It was this huge community of people who were doing just that and swearing by it as a way to simplify their lives and be more productive. And I thought, hey, you know what? Better living through chemistry. The future's now. Let's try this. And I gave it a shot for a while, and it just made me feel sluggish and gassy. So it turns out regular food's the way to go.
Well, yeah, as a parent of young children too, I can see why that would be a draw. The end of food would be a pretty fundamental change. You write that disruption is overrated. Is that because true disruption is such a big leap?
In a way, yeah, that was a theme throughout my blown calls over the years. Companies come along, they have these visionary founders who have really sold themselves and their investors and their employees on an idea, and they have to, 99 out of 100 startups are not going to be a runaway success, and something like 8 out of 10 are just going to fail outright. So you have to be a little bit nuts, a little bit cultish to get any startup to the point where it might succeed. So I understand that ideology, but what it leads to is a lot of folks saying, hey, this is going to change everything, and that basically never happens. I'm not saying it absolutely never happens, but this idea that disruption is a dominant theme in Silicon Valley, overall, it's pretty silly. There's a lot of kind of accessibility and selection bias there when people try to tell those stories.
What do you mean by that, selection bias?
Well, people look back at the few times that there was a disruptive innovation and they say, hey, this is the norm. Maybe they are saying, oh, look at how mobile, let's say the smartphone, for example, disrupted the PC industry. And there's some truth to that. But, the tech industry has a quote unquote iPhone moment once every 2-3 decades. It's very rare that you have an internet moment or a smartphone moment. And the thing is, even when that happens, it's very often these big entrenched companies that have the resources to capitalize on that in the first place. So, the iPhone moment, that wasn't created by a company nobody had ever heard of. It was Apple. I mean, they brought us the PC revolution in the first place. That's often the case.
Yeah, if there was so much disruption, why would Apple, Microsoft, Google still be Apple, Microsoft, and Google, and now maybe throw in NVIDIA or whomever? Of the stuff that has gotten a lot of hype over the years that you've written about but didn't take off, the stuff that fails, Christopher, are there common denominators there that you can identify as to why those things failed?
A lot of things fail because people create a demo and then they overestimate their ability to accomplish some complicated task. And frankly, they underestimate the knowledge that already exists in a given industry. A lot of it is hubris. A lot of it is kind of failing to understand what the real barriers are. I mean, a lot of times the barriers to innovation in a given industry really are that it's complicated, that it's heavily regulated, that there's just a ton of institutional inertia, that people are hard to convince. You know, you may have a better way to do things, but good luck getting everybody on board with your new way of doing something.
So if all those hurdles are in place and we have an awareness of that, then why do you think we're so susceptible to believing or even wanting to believe in the next big thing?
Well, it's a lovely distraction from what's actually going on, isn't it? I mean, much better to believe in the disruptive power of the next big thing than to try to do the hard and sometimes tedious work of tackling the climate crisis or addressing the root of the loneliness epidemic or the decline of civil society. I mean, there's a lot of things that I think we'd rather not focus on. So, yeah, something shiny and new comes along. Let's pay attention to that.
Well, the current big thing, obviously, is artificial intelligence. Given the track record of failure for a lot of so-called disruptive technologies, do you think in 10 years we'll look back and think that AI has lived up to the current hype?
We'll look at it approximately the way that we look at, let's say, self-driving today. And not coincidentally, that is also based on AI. So we'll say, Uber's Travis Kalanick and the leaders of Lyft and the folks behind many other startups and big companies like GM were wrong. We're not getting robo-taxis on anything like the timetable that we were promised or that Elon Musk still promises. So same thing with AI. I think that we're going to look back and say, all those folks who said, we were just 12 months or a couple years away from disrupting every knowledge worker's job in the world, that looks pretty laughable in retrospect. But am I using AI every day? Is it having, maybe a subtle impact on my life in some ways? And then in the future, a not so subtle impact? Yeah, absolutely.
When you think about AI or when we read about AI or people talk about AI, some of the conversation is about some of the really scary scenarios. I mean, you've got the existential threat of AI bringing about the end of humanity. But dialing that back a bit, you also have stuff like AI and the surveillance state and all of us constantly being surveilled and AI playing a role in that. You write a little bit about the idea of whether we're using technology or technology is using us. Is that a question that is answerable at this point? Are we using technology or are we more sort of not victims, but servants to whatever is happening that big tech is rolling out?
Well, it's certainly always both. I feel like we have more agency in that than we often recognize. Although, of course, it also depends on our job. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think the people who are the most affected by algorithms and AI are the people who have the least power in the workplace. Some of us have more agency than others, and there are a lot of professions where probably it's time that there was significant pushback in terms of how much control over the circumstances of our work AI has.
Well, if you think about that pushback, do you see guardrails coming? Or in some cases, do you even see guardrails as possible?
Guardrails is a funny question because I think that when you're talking about people, especially in blue-collar professions, having some power over their workplace, like absolutely they should have more of that power. But when you talk about guardrails in terms of these, let's just call them what they are, chatbots, I think that to advocate for guardrails, I have kind of the opposite view. I think to advocate for guardrails there is to buy into this hype that these chatbots are going to become super intelligent soon. So we have to do so-called super alignment to make sure that they don't try and kill us all, get the nuclear codes and whatever. I think that's pretty silly.
This is comforting. I mean, I'm sure you've had this conversation before with people when you talk to them about AI and you sort of give them your thoughts on that. Do they find it comforting?
I think people do find it comforting. Sometimes, though, they push back. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who, we're in an age where there are a lot of compounding issues that can feel like existential threats. And I think there is a certain amount of fatalism creeping in where people are like, like AI is going to take over all the creative jobs. And the only thing that's left is going to be the rote stuff where AI is my boss. But I think in general, definitely when people hear, no, it's not going to become super intelligent and become Skynet or something. Yeah, I would hope that's comforting.
It is. So then finally, Christopher, you've been writing this column for 10 years. You've written about stuff that has been wild successes, and you've written about failures of all shapes and sizes. Do you find yourself becoming more optimistic about tech and big tech and technology, or perhaps more cynical?
I think I remain a guarded optimist. I think I am vastly more cynical about the stuff that paradoxically we hear about the most. I think that there is so much tech that kind of gets pushed on us, like, oh, these new AI PCs or, super intelligent chatbots or whatever. And it just feels like nonsense and a distraction. But then when I look deeper and I look at the way that people are using even AI, for example, to solve real world problems, to make systems more efficient, to make them safer, I do feel optimistic about that. That progress is still happening.
Well, Christopher Mims, thank you.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure being here.
Christopher Mims is a technology columnist for The Wall Street Journal. That's all for this week. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. And if you're looking for one more way to listen, you can now stream live radio on the CBC News app. You can also get all the news on the CBC News app. How's that for branding? The show is produced by Daniel Nerman, Ellis Cho, Jenny DeRosio, and Jennifer Keene, with help from Caroline Ferris. We'd also like to give a special thanks to Helen Henderson. She just retired. She's a very special friend of the show. And she was a really good boss. Everyone should be so lucky. Thanks, Helen. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Thanks for listening.